All right. Welcome everyone today for our webinar on Is High Intensity Exercise the Missing Link in Your Exercise Program? Thank you all for coming, and I will keep everybody muted, but if you have a question as I start to present, as I'm going along, feel free to unmute and ask that question, or you also can send a question in the chat. I will be keeping an eye on the chat as we go along, and then we'll also have time for questions at the end. So if you prefer just to wait until the end, you can remember your question or write it down and we can talk about it then. So the reason we're talking about high intensity exercise is because I think, this really is kind of a buzzword these days. A lot of people are hearing about high intensity exercise and you may not know exactly what that means or how to do it, or maybe you have pain in your knee and you're like, I can't do this kind of exercise because it's painful. So I wanted to come and talk about really what is this kind of exercise? Why is it important? What does the research say? What is high intensity? How do we measure that? What are we really looking at? And talk a little bit about potential barriers. If you have pain or arthritis or other things that limit your ability to do this kind of exercise, how could we get started and have a goal of working towards doing the higher intensity exercise? I think more and more people are learning how important exercise is for people with Parkinson's. It's one of the most important treatments that people can be doing. But then once you get started with an exercise program, there's all different types of exercise, and they're all pretty much all beneficial, but in different ways. And high intensity, when it comes to aerobic intensity, is really the type of exercise that has the most research to show that it can improve symptoms and has the potential to slow the progression of Parkinson's. So I am on a personal mission to try and help more people get to this type of exercise and be able to get to these higher levels of intensity. Because like my friend Sage here, what she said today in the quick video that I took of her, which I haven't posted yet, she said that she's really surprised at how different she feels with so much more exercise. She's not feeling really tired or sore. She feels like she's more motivated to move throughout her day. Daily activities are easier. And that she mentioned it really actually is the high intensity exercise that is helping her feel the most different. That moderate intensity, she doesn't feel the same boost or the same difference from. And there still are, again, lots of good reasons to do all different forms of exercise, but we really want to try to be smart and strategic and say, okay, if this high intensity exercise is important, how can we help support as many people as possible in doing this kind of exercise? So that is what we are here to talk about today. So I just want to introduce myself. My name is Claire McLean. I'm a physical therapist. I've specialized working with people who have Parkinson's for 15 years now, since I graduated from physical therapy school. I went to University of Southern California, which is a great PT school and also unique because they were doing some of the earliest research to look at high intensity exercise and how it could impact people with Parkinson's. So they published the first study back in 2007, 15 years ago, showing that when people did high intensity exercise on a treadmill, so people were actually wearing harnesses for safety to make sure that they could really push the speed and the challenge level on the treadmill. They were measuring heart rate, making sure they were getting into the aerobic zone. And they were measuring a brain measurement using transcranial magnetic stimulation. And what they showed is that when people with Parkinson's, who typically actually had a hyperexcitability in their brain, when they did this high intensity exercise, the excitability reduced to healthy norms. So in our brain, in some cases, excitability is a good thing. In some cases, it's not. In this case, hyperexcitability, more excitability than what is natural, is not good and could be related to symptoms. So they were able to show that high intensity exercise helped the people with Parkinson's brains activity look more like people who didn't have Parkinson's, who didn't have symptoms, were healthy and living their lives. So that's what we want, is we want to find out kind of what are the things that are happening with Parkinson's that are pathologic. What can we do in terms of different treatments to help normalize it, to reduce your symptoms, help you feel better, and hopefully really change the trajectory of your whole life through this exercise. So I went to USC, so I got introduced to this early on. I've taken really every course that I know of out there: LSVT Big, Power Moves, courses with the Parkinson Foundation, Rock Steady Boxing. I started working with people with Parkinson's right after I graduated from PT school, and I just saw people get so much better that I was very motivated to specialize in this area and really help as many people as I could get better and really learn about the research and adhere to it so they could get maximal benefit from the time that they spend exercising. So I've worked multiple different types of places, outpatient clinics. I worked on research studies, which was also very enlightening and really enjoyable. About 7 years ago, I started my own program. So I was working at a hospital and it was a great place to work. We had a great movement disorders program. We had physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, movement disorders neurologist, a DBS surgery program. It was a wonderful place to work. We had classes as well. And so what I found is that I really loved teaching classes. Physical therapy typically is done one-on-one. So that's most physical therapists do one-on-one therapy. I just really found that I enjoyed teaching classes. And what I also found is that when people had more access to exercise on a regular basis, they had better outcomes. So individual physical and occupational and speech therapy are all very good and helpful. You want to access those therapies, but typically they are limited in some ways. There's limitations in insurance coverage, being able to go somewhere where they have therapists who really specialize in Parkinson's. So different insurances give you different access. Even if you have Medicare, which has good coverage, and you often can go to, almost any clinic you want to, Medicare does have a dollar amount each year for therapy. And so they expect you to go to therapy, learn exercises, and then keep exercising on your own. That's how the system is set up. But the truth is, for people with Parkinson's, and most of us, honestly, most older adults, most middle-aged adults, we really benefit from support and a community to exercise with, and trainers or coaches or physical therapists to learn from. So I worked at the hospital and we had some classes, and once people were done with their physical therapy, they could join these classes. We had 5 classes a week. They got full pretty quickly. People really enjoyed them. It was a fun way to exercise, and they got coaching and information that helped support them in continuing with exercise. We measured people's ability, their endurance, their balance, their symptoms. We were measuring people every few months over the course of 2 years. And over the course of 2 years, pretty much everybody got better over that period of time. And it was amazing to see this. And I thought, okay, we need to do more of this. We've got to add more classes. There's more people who need this. In Orange County, where I'm located, Orange County, California, they're estimated to be 8,000 people who have Parkinson's. So there is a huge population out there that I think really needs and would benefit from support when it comes to exercise. At the hospital, unfortunately, I didn't get the opportunity to increase the number of classes. And so I chose to go out on my own because I really felt strongly that this was something that was needed. I had a number of people I was working with who said, yes, we want to take more classes. We'll do this with you. So 7 years ago, we got started with 1 class in a park. And we have grown now. We have a gym here that is 6,000 square feet. We have 36 classes a week. And I have a bunch of people, the people who are in this picture, I have been working with now for over 10 years. So as a physical therapist, I think I'm probably one of the therapists who has the most experience working with people the most consistently over the longest period of time, people who have Parkinson's. This is one of our members, Dennis, who has had Parkinson's over 20 years now. I've known him for 10 years. And he has improved and maintained that improvement and is, basically the same level of function, independent, driving, doesn't use an assistive device, coming in for classes over 20 years after diagnosis. So it's really cool to see what is possible when people really have access to this type of exercise. So that's me. That's why I'm here. I want to spread the word about exercise and get as many people as possible exercising and really doing the right kind of exercise. See if it'll go to my next slide. So let's define it. When we're talking about high intensity exercise, there are different ways that we could, different types of exercise we could be referring to with high intensity. Lifting heavy weight could be high intensity for you. Something like swimming or trying something new could be high intensity. There's even different levels of a balance challenge. But what we are talking about is with regards to aerobic intensity. So looking at 60 to 80% of heart rate max. And many research studies, I'm going to talk about these research studies, but there are lots of research studies now that have shown that when people do aerobic exercise, when they get to a higher intensity level, most of these studies look at between 60 to 80%. Some have been a little bit lower, like at 50 to 55. Some have gone a little bit higher, up to 85% heart rate max. But for the most part, they have looked at between 60 and 80% heart rate max. They demonstrate consistent improvement in Parkinson's symptoms and show potential to slow the progression of the disease. So we're focusing on exercise where you can elevate your heart rate to 60 to 80% heart rate max. even within this range, there is some separation. Some people would kind of consider 60% to be more moderate or moderate to high, versus once you're above 70%, closer to 80, that is like a true high intensity. For our purposes, though, the main thing we're looking at is between 60 and 80. And then depending on the person and what you're capable of doing, you may even work on aiming for higher, getting closer to 80. And then you may have some days where you're around 60% and some days where you're around 80%. But kind of within that spectrum is what we're looking for. This is not a time today where we're going to do this exercise together, because there are 32 people on this call, and there's a good chance that the kind of exercise that would be the right high intensity for them, for all of us, is different. So we each need to find what is the right kind of exercise for us to get our heart rate up into that range. So today is really just an educational lecture to talk about it, but we won't be trying to do it together today, because there's probably, in a group of 32, maybe at least like 5 to 10 kind of different forms of exercise that might be the best based on each of your particular situations, your age, how long you've had Parkinson's, what access to equipment you have. Do you have access to a bike or treadmill? Do you have any past medical history, including any cardiovascular history that you need to be aware of? Do you have pain or arthritis that limits your exercise or movement speed? So those are things that we have to take into consideration. So we're going to talk about exercise today, and then hopefully you'll feel like you have a place to start with when it comes to exercise. So I want to go over some of the studies because I find them very compelling, and I think it's very motivating to see this research. So this research study was just published in 2022. It's very recent. The title is Aerobic Exercise Alters Brain Function and Structure in Parkinson's Disease, a randomized control trial. So their objective was, or they were saying other randomized control trials have shown that aerobic exercise attenuates motor symptom progression in Parkinson's disease, but the underlying neural mechanisms are unclear. Here we investigated how aerobic exercise influences disease-related functional and structural changes. So structural is like the actual size of our brain and the physical neurons. Functional is how the different parts of our brains connect with each other. So these are both important. They're both impacted by Parkinson's. They both can be improved through exercise. So they looked at both the functional and structural changes in the cortical striatal sensory motor network. Sorry to get technical, but this is, connectivity part of the brain that connects our sensory and our motor system. And let's see, which is involved in the emergence of motor deficits in Parkinson's disease. Additionally, we explored effects of aerobic exercise on tissue integrity of the substantia nigra and on behavioral and cerebral indices of cognitive control. So here they talked about tissue integrity of the substantia nigra. You may have heard this before because this is the specific part of the brain that is impacted by Parkinson's. This is where the dopamine neurons can be dying over time and not producing as much dopamine. So we want to see does exercise actually affect that specific part of the brain? And then they also wanted to look at cognition. Cognition is super important for all of us in our health. Parkinson's can impact cognition. So we want to know, can exercise have improvements in that area as well? So they have their methods described here, but we're going to look at the results. So they showed that aerobic exercise, but not stretching, they were comparing aerobic exercise to stretching, aerobic exercise led to increased functional connectivity of the anterior putamen within the sensory motor cortex relative to the posterior putamen. I know some of these words may not mean anything to you, and that's totally fine. But basically what they're saying is that they saw changes in how the brain was functioning, and it was positive changes. That was, with Parkinson's, there are certain patterns of activation that are not ideal. And so they showed that there was an improvement in the activation patterns. They also showed behaviorally that aerobic exercise improved cognitive control. Furthermore, aerobic exercise increased functional connectivity in the brain and reduced global brain atrophy. So with aging, it can be common with aging, with different diagnoses, for the brain actually to somewhat shrink over time. And that's kind of indicating that there are less neurons. So here they actually showed with exercise for 6 months that people had bigger brains when they were doing aerobic exercise than when they were doing stretching exercise. So stretching exercise may feel good, and anything that feels good, I definitely encourage you to do. but it is not probably what is going to change how your brain functions. And that is what we are trying to do. We are trying to improve how our brains function through exercise. So their interpretation was that MRI, clinical, and behavioral results converge towards the conclusion that aerobic exercise stabilizes disease progression in the cortical striatal sensory motor network and enhances cognitive performance. Boom. Like, that's why we want to do this type of exercise. It's very, very important. Another summary, this was a review article where Dr. Alskog, who is a movement disorders neurologist at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, he's written a couple of great articles. This was one of the first ones he wrote about exercise, saying, okay, let's ask the question, let's look at the research. Does vigorous exercise have a neuroprotective effect in Parkinson's? This article was published in 2011, 11 years ago, a long time. This data has existed for a while, but it takes time for the data to exist, for it to actually be out in the real world, and for people to be following these guidelines. So I won't go through, I won't read the whole abstract here. We will send this video out afterwards, and I probably will also save these slides and make those available too, so that if you, or I'll add the links to these articles, so that if it's anything that you want to look at afterwards and look at in more depth, you can. But here, what he said, that these findings have several implications for PD clinicians. So he's talking about physicians, neurologists, doctors that you're working with, and also physical therapists. Ongoing vigorous exercise and physical fitness should be highly encouraged. PD physical therapy programs should include structured, graduated fitness instruction and guidance for people with Parkinson's, especially if they're deconditioned. But also, our goal is to not wait for you to be deconditioned to get you going with this kind of exercise. We want to start before you feel like you need it, because that's when you have the best opportunity to really get a lot better and ideally never experience that deconditioning or as much of a progression of your symptoms.
Excuse me,
yes.
I didn't understand what decondition meant.
Oh, yeah, great question. Deconditioned basically means that your fitness level has decreased. So, prior to having Parkinson's, you probably felt like, okay, I can go out to the grocery store. I can kind of walk as far as I need to if I want to go out and, do something in the community.
I can do a half marathon.
Yeah. Maybe you train and do a half marathon. I mean, that I would say is above average. That's not necessarily what everybody's doing, but if that's what you were doing before, yes, that you kind of had this ability level, and that through exercise, you could do things like, running a half marathon is awesome. Or even like a 5K, or going for a walk in your neighborhood. With Parkinson's, there are sometimes it's symptoms, rigidity in your muscles, or pain, or fatigue, or, other things that could be going on related to Parkinson's, or sometimes potentially effects of medication to some degree. These things might make you less active over time, or might make it more difficult to exercise. And the less we exercise, the less we move, we get deconditioned, and then our fitness level is lower. And then we actually find it hard maybe to do even just regular daily activities. So even for me, I have a pretty active job, but if I stayed in my house for a week and maybe even stayed in bed for a good amount of that time, I would get deconditioned. This is something that happens to any human with a change in their activity levels. If we are less active, we get deconditioned. If someone goes into the hospital for, let's say you had a knee replacement, just the time that you spend in the hospital in bed, if it's just maybe even a few days, that impacts the system physiologically, even if that person doesn't have Parkinson's. But Parkinson's just has multiple things, both kind of the motivation to go out and do things, sometimes, maybe feeling comfortable or not feeling comfortable going out and doing the things you previously done. Most people with Parkinson's tend to be less active over time and just do less movement throughout their day. And the less you're doing, the easier it is to get deconditioned. So that was what Dr. Alskog is saying, is that we really, for someone who's deconditioned, we really need to help them get reconditioned through exercise. But I'm even adding on to that and saying, let's not wait. If someone's deconditioned, we certainly want to help them get in better shape. But I also don't actually want to wait for someone to get deconditioned. I want to help people as early as possible, as recently as possible after diagnosis, to learn about this exercise, implement this exercise, so that hopefully they can actually prevent that deconditioning from happening and hopefully have an impact on their symptoms over time as well. So thank you very much. I know, I really like to share research because I think it's very motivating, but I know that also sometimes there are going to be terms and words that you may not be familiar with. So let me know anytime. I'm happy to explain them. Or if it's something that I don't actually know even exactly what they're saying, I'll be honest about that. The last thing that Dr. Alskog said here too, number 3 of his kind of points, is that levodopa and other forms of dopamine replenishment therapy should be utilized to achieve maximum capability and motivation for patients to maintain fitness. So what this means is medications should not just be to treat your symptoms. Absolutely, we want them to treat your symptoms so that your symptoms are less bothersome. Hopefully you don't experience them as much. But sometimes there is a difference in medication optimization if you are just trying to treat symptoms versus if you're actually supporting yourself in exercising. And I spend all day, every day with people with Parkinson's who are exercising, and we really see a difference in how much people are able to push themselves with exercise, especially when it comes to higher intensity. And if someone hasn't started taking medication and has pretty significant symptoms, or if they're taking a really low dose, sometimes they're essentially a little bit under medicated. And if that dopamine is low in their system, that really makes it hard to exercise well. They may not be as motivated to exercise. They may not feel well while they're exercising or feel well after they exercise. People are more likely to be extra fatigued and sore when they're under medicated. So just, something to think about with your doctor when you see them, your neurologist, is not just, is my tremor treated or other symptoms that you might be paying attention to, but really think about, how do I feel when I try to exercise? Can I exercise well? Can I push myself? And if so, great. If not, that is something to talk to your doctor in terms of medication. You might need to try a little bit higher dose or make some adjustments to really support yourself in exercising well. Great questions. Okay, another review. And I promise I just have a few of these, not a ton, but I do think this is important to know that there is so much research out there. If your doctor isn't talking to you about this, they're missing a piece of the puzzle. So you want to share, you might even want to share with them and say, this is really important. Make sure to talk to your patients about it. And if your doctor says you should really be doing high intensity exercise, are you getting your heart rate up? Are you getting sweaty and out of breath? If you say, no, I'm not able to because of pain or arthritis or balance difficulties, or I'm not motivated, that is when you absolutely should be getting a referral to physical therapy to help you get started and remove any of those barriers to that form of exercise. It is true, not every single person is going to be able to do high intensity exercise. There are some barriers, but I would definitely say more than 50%, a high percentage of people with Parkinson's should be able to do this form of exercise. But absolutely, it does matter when you get started. The longer you wait to get started with this type of exercise, it potentially will be more difficult to get going. So you want to start early, start before you need it. All right, so this paper was also by Dr. Alskog. This was an update published in 2018, where he discusses the fact that no medications are proven to slow, I'll read the title of it too. Aerobic exercise, evidence for a direct brain effect to slow Parkinson's disease progression. Otherwise, there is not any other treatment that has been proven yet to slow the progression. Exercise really has the best opportunity. So in his abstract, he says, no medications are proven to slow the progression of Parkinson's disease. Of special concern with longer-standing Parkinson's is cognitive decline, as well as motor symptoms that are unresponsive to dopamine replacement therapy. Not fully recognized is the substantial accumulating evidence that long-term aerobic exercise may attenuate PD progression. Randomized controlled trial proof will not be forthcoming due to many complicating methodological factors. However, extensive and diverse avenues of scientific investigation converge to argue that aerobic exercise and cardiovascular fitness directly influence cerebral mechanisms mediating PD progression. To objectively assess the evidence for a PD exercise benefit, a comprehensive PubMed literature search was conducted with an unbiased focus on aerobic. Lost my place. To objectively, PubMed was conducted with an unbiased focus on exercise influences on Parkinsonism, cognition, brain structure, and brain function. This aggregate literature provides a compelling argument for regular aerobic type exercise and cardiovascular fitness attenuating PD progression. So he's saying basically what he said here, proof will be difficult to accomplish because when it comes to research, exercise research is very expensive to do. And the government does pay for some research to happen, but there's no industry like the pharmaceutical industry for exercise to say we are going to invest money in doing this research because we will directly make that money back. There's just no industry like that. Exercise is something that is freely available. No one is, we run a program to help people exercise. And so it is a business, but, we just make money by helping people exercise. We don't make enough money to be able to fund $1 million research study to be able to investigate, with research further. So there are some limitations why one big study that would provide proof that exercise can slow the progression of Parkinson's, it will be difficult for that to occur. It's possible. There's a big study happening right now that probably has the first opportunity to provide essentially proof. But in the meantime, he's saying that there are so many different studies out there that are all saying the same thing. We shouldn't wait to have one study that proves it. There's enough research that's saying this is possible and people need to be doing this type of exercise. And we could really be slowing the progression of Parkinson's. And like my experience working with people over 10 years, I'm seeing people not really experience much progression over the course of a whole 10 years. That is a lot of time. This one was the first study that showed that exercise could actually increase dopamine production in the brain. So that's very exciting. This one showed, they actually looked at 2 different intensity levels, but they measured Parkinson's symptoms with the UPDRS, the same test that you may have had done at your doctor's office with tapping fingers, opening and closing hands, tapping your feet. So that is how they measure Parkinson's symptoms. And in this study, they showed people doing high intensity exercise had a slow progression over a long term. It was like a 2-year study. So that's a pretty long study. So just the research just keeps adding up. This study, and this one was on treadmill exercise. This one is cycling using stationary bikes. And what they showed is that forced, not voluntary exercise improves motor function in people with Parkinson's. So just going out and doing exercise that you enjoy and that feels good, that is great. You're moving your body. But all of us need to be challenged to work at a higher level than what we feel comfortable with to actually see benefits. Someone who wants to be in the Olympics, they don't just get to do the sport, play the sport for fun and go to the Olympics. They have to train, they have to strength train, they have to do aerobic exercise, and they have to practice their sport. We all, if we're really trying to achieve improvement in our ability to do things, we have to do more than what is comfortable. And so this study was, I think, from back in 2011 as well. It's been out for a long time now, but they show that when people are cycling, the faster they cycled, when they were pushed to pedal faster than what felt comfortable, they had better outcomes than people who are allowed to pedal at their comfortable rate. So this is, something that if you can say, okay, I'm going to do this on my own. I have a bike at home. And normally when I pedal, it feels comfortable to pedal at about, 50 RPMs. I'm going to add some resistance and keep it there. No. What the research tells us is that you need to be aiming for 80 to 90 RPMs on the bike. So it's great when we have research that really gives us a goal. If 80 to 90 feels really out of reach to start with, you start with where you're at. So if you're in the 50s, you aim for the 50s. And then after a couple of weeks of doing it, you say, okay, now it's time to bump it up. I'm going to aim for the 60s. And your goal is to get into the 60s with your RPM. And then a couple of weeks later, 70s, and then 80s. This is what we do here at Rogue with our in-person membership and with our online membership is we work with people. We say, where are you at? What's the goal? Let's work towards it. Let's be in touch to make sure that this is happening. And we see people get better and be able to do more than they ever thought was possible all the time. Like every single day that happens. So I want to, connect with all of you and try to really encourage you to do this. All right. This I think is almost the last one. So this review paper was really talking about how, yes, all forms of exercise is good, but aerobic exercise is different and is very important for your entire exercise program to really be the most beneficial. So they talk about a motor cognitive approach and aerobic training. So motor cognitive is anytime you're trying to learn a new skill, or if you're going to boxing classes or dance classes or Tai Chi, There is a movement component, and then there's also a cognitive component because you have to learn what are they asking you to do in this new type of exercise. So when you're challenging yourself with motor cognitive exercise, boxing, Tai Chi, dancing, power moves, LSVT big, all these great options out there, that is very good. But if you are not doing aerobic exercise along with it, you will probably not experience as much benefit as if you have both of those types of exercise happening, motor cognitive and aerobic exercise. They say it's a synergism for rehabilitative and intervention for Parkinson's. So their practice points, there's multiple points here. The main one I want us to focus on is here where they talk about that aerobic exercise may promote neural rearrangements and improve cognition in people with Parkinson's. So neuroplasticity is our nervous system's ability to change in response to our life and our environment. We talk a lot about positive neuroplasticity. That is when you exercise and challenge yourself, your brain can literally get bigger. You can grow new neurons, although it takes time. We see a lot of functional changes in connectivity in the brain with exercise, and all of these are really good for us. But it might be that you have to have aerobic exercise to really get the most out of it. This image that they have is very helpful. So they say, okay, in rehabilitation treatment, so whether you're going to therapy or exercising on your own, you want to have exercise that is goal-based. It's crucial to promote the motor behavioral learning in a given context. And again, that's where playing tennis, boxing, Tai Chi, learning new and different things is really good for you. And there's goal-based, like you learn, okay, I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to do that well. And motor cognitive is that type of exercise, crucial to improve the execution of actions, exploiting the network spared by the disease process. So we're really trying to use the whole brain. We're using areas that aren't impacted by Parkinson's, and we're trying to hopefully improve the functioning of the areas that are impacted by Parkinson's. Intensive. It's crucial to drive motor and cognitive benefits through neuroplastic changes. So you need frequent practice. You need lots of repetitions of practice to really change how your brain is functioning. And here what they show is that aerobic exercise is likely required to maximize the neuroplasticity. If you are just doing dance or boxing, and maybe you're getting your heart rate up a little bit, but not consistently and not as high or maybe for as long, you're not going to get as much benefit as if you actually incorporate that aerobic exercise very consistently. So research is telling us we got to do it. So let's just talk about the details a little bit more. How do you know what 60 to 80% is for you? So there is a calculation, and you may have heard of a calculation where you did 220 minus your age and then multiply that by 0.6 for 60% or 0.8 for 80%. That is a very general way to do the math, and it's not very accurate. It is much more accurate to use what is called the Kevorkian heart rate calculator. This is the gold standard for calculating your max heart rate, and therefore what would your 60 to 80% heart rate max be. So there's a website. If you Google Kevorkian heart rate calculator, you can find this website. You enter your age and your resting heart rate. So you have to find out what your resting heart rate is. Sit for 5 minutes, and you could either take your blood pressure with a machine that gives you your heart rate. You could manually check your heart rate. If you use any type of smartwatch or device, it likely tells you what your resting heart rate is, or you could look and see what the average has been. So you enter your age and your resting heart rate. I did the calculation for someone who is 65 years old with a resting heart rate of 60. That's kind of average for our members, but the younger you are, the higher your heart rate will need to go. And versus the older you are, a lower heart rate will be within that percentage range. And what your resting heart rate is also influences what your max heart rate is and what these percentages are. So this was the old method. So on this row here, if you did 220 minus 65 times 0.6, you get this number, 93. That is significantly underestimating actually what your 60% heart rate should be. When you do Kevorkian formula, the gold standard, and we put in 65-year-old with a resting heart rate of 60, 60% of heart rate max is 117 beats per minute. So that's pretty high, and that takes work to get to, but that is what has been occurring in these research studies where they showed the benefit. So you need to know what your numbers are, and then you need to measure it during exercise to see if you're actually getting into that range. So 60% would be 117, and then 80% would be 136. So I would say you would write those numbers down, you would post it somewhere so that you know what that 60 to 80% heart rate max range is for you. And then ideally you have a way that you're measuring it so you can see for the different forms of exercise that you do, which ones are you able to get in that zone? You may be doing, exercise, lots of great exercise, but not necessarily getting into that zone. And that could be holding you back from getting the full benefit. So how do we measure and monitor it during exercise? So there's multiple different ways you can monitor. You could get a polar chest strap. The chest strap is historically the gold standard in terms of way to measure your heart rate. It is the closest to your heart. Wearing the strap, it does take a little bit to get it on and off, but if it's something that you're using at home, you probably will get used to it. And that would be a great way to measure. And then it connects to your phone or a device to give you the information, or it may connect to a watch as well. Like if you have a polar watch, then you could see it on your watch, but there is no display on this chest strap here. You have to have it connected to something to actually see what the data is. What we use here in person for our membership is what's called the Scosh Rhythm Plus armband. Scosh has a couple different ones. We use the one called Rhythm Plus, and it goes on your arm like this. So this works for us because we have members coming in and out, and for everybody to get a chest strap on, that's a little bit more difficult. Having this arm strap is a much easier place to put it on the body. It can go on the upper arm or on the upper part of the lower arm, the forearm. It's comfortable to wear. It's easy to take on and off. And for us, we just switch out, we clean them and we switch out the straps and wash those so that people can, between classes, we can keep using them. And then we have it displayed up on an app for heart rate monitoring. But this is something, if you use something like this at home, you connect it to, again, either a phone, a tablet, a watch. And so you're able to see the readings. The reading is not right on the device. The chest strap is the gold standard. These armbands, Scosh has done research to show how accurate they are. And so they are highly accurate. I would say we do sometimes have challenges when people have a heart arrhythmia or if they have really low blood pressure. Sometimes the armbands, have a little bit more trouble detecting that heart rate consistently, but it is an option. So depending on kind of what seems like the better option, either a chest strap or one of these armbands would likely be the best. You also do have an option of a smartwatch, though, like an iWatch, Fitbit, Android versions. These can be convenient because maybe you already wear one as your watch, and maybe you track your activity and your steps. The only thing is that they are not as accurate at the wrist as they are at the chest or at the upper arm, because basically your wrist is significantly further away from your heart. And also the wrist is a pretty bony area that it can be hard to get your strap on tight. So when I'm exercising, I have an iWatch and I like it for a lot of reasons and I use it with exercise, but sometimes I have to tighten it to make sure it's tight. And sometimes that's a little bit uncomfortable on my wrist, especially if I'm doing exercise where I'm, weight bearing on my hand and wrist. So I have to tighten it up to make sure it's tight enough. And then sometimes it's not tight enough. And during exercise, it's not capturing my heart rate. So the wrist ones, although are convenient, are not the most accurate. So that's something that you want to consider. There also was a recent study that just came out where they studied a Fitbit and they showed that the Fitbit consistently undermeasured people's heart rates. And they also looked at an Android one and it actually overestimated people's heart rates. So it's challenging because I want you guys to be able to use kind of what is the most convenient, simplest one for your life, but really to get accurate information using one that is really designed specifically for measuring heart rate, where it can be on your arm or on your chest, as close to your heart as possible, will likely be the most accurate. But, if you have one of these, an iWatch, a Fitbit, Android, if that's what you have right now, certainly I would get started with that and see, are you getting into that range? Does it seem accurate? Maybe even double check it with something else to make sure it's accurate. But some way of actually measuring your intensity when you're exercising is important, because we can get sweaty, out of breath, we can work really hard and not necessarily be in that aerobic zone. So it's really important to measure, to actually make sure that you're getting into the zone so that you can get the maximal benefit. So how much do you need to do? So best research indicates a minimum of 3 to 4 days per week and 30 to 60 minutes per day. Definitely, if you're just getting started, 10 minutes is better than nothing. 5 minutes is better than nothing, but you just can't stay at 5 or 10 minutes. You really need to, over time, try to increase the amount of time that you're able to do this exercise for. And same thing, maybe you start with 1 day per week, but you should have a goal of 3 to 4 times per week. If you have multiple research studies have kind of shown that 3 days a week is the minimum that you need to do to expect benefit. So the problem is if you plan for 3 days a week and then each week or every other week you miss one of those days because things come up or you're not feeling well, then you're going to be like on average below that threshold. So that's where it's better to aim for 4 days a week of aerobic exercise so that even if you miss a day, you still get in those 3 days per week. So those are things that I recommend. Let's discuss potential barriers. So certainly pain, arthritis, injuries, these are things that are going to limit your ability to exercise. If you have any of these things going on, you absolutely should see physical and potentially occupational therapy as well to help decrease that pain so that you can exercise. Then it's also a matter of kind of figuring out what is the best type of exercise for you to do. Is using a stationary bike something you could do, an elliptical, a treadmill, not using equipment, other things. So there are many, many different types of exercise you can do, but we really want to see, can we find something where you can get your heart rate up? Things like swimming are great. And it's just like, for a lot of things, how we do it is what determines whether or not it's aerobic. Walking is a great one. We can go out for a walk in our neighborhood. If we're walking our dog, likely we are not getting our heart rate up that high because the dog's sniffing, unless you have your dog healing, trained, and you are walking and you keep moving and they're not sniffing anything, that's kind of the only way you're probably able to get your heart rate up. Otherwise, going out for a walk is great. It's beneficial no matter what, but we are trying to say, is it aerobic or not? And if it's not aerobic, we're trying to find another version of exercise you can do that is aerobic. Or we're saying you might need to adjust your walk. Maybe you take your dog for their walk and then you leave them at home, give them their dinner, and you go out for another walk where you are pushing it. You are walking as fast and as big as you can to hopefully get your heart rate up. So if you have these limitations, you want to start slow. You're going to ramp up very slowly over time in terms of the exercise. Sometimes it might take months. It could take 6 months for you to reduce your pain, get started with exercise, and build up to doing aerobic intensity level exercise. And that might feel really slow to you, but in the long term, 6 months is going to be a very short amount of time. So that's something, if you need someone to help support you in that, find somebody who can help you, because sometimes it can feel really slow. It could feel a little bit demoralizing, but I will tell you that it's not something that you have to do tomorrow. It's something I would like you to think about, get started with, set a goal, and figure out how you're going to start from where you are now to doing this exercise consistently. Like I mentioned at the beginning, medication optimization is something that needs to be looked at. That's something to talk to your doctor about. You really need to get good at assessing yourself and how you feel so that you can bring good information to your neurologist. And if you're trying to exercise and you're really feeling tired or unwell or sore and you really can't exercise, you should talk to your doctor about it so that they can help you. And I'm realizing that my computer is low battery. I didn't have it plugged in over here. So I'm going to go over to my desk so I can plug it in. I just walk with my computer over here. So medication optimization is very important. And then past medical history is also important to consider as well. Things like having had a heart attack or having high blood pressure or other cardiac things. This is very common in our population in the US. So if you know that these things are going on, it doesn't mean that you can't do high intensity exercise, but it does mean that you need to be aware of what is happening, how can you safely exercise, and again, kind of get started low and slow and work your way up slowly over time. The good news is aerobic exercise is also actually very healthy for the brain. So it's a good thing for you to do, but it's just a matter of getting started the right way. So I would almost say there's almost nothing that completely prevents you from being able to get to this form of exercise, but sometimes it's a process getting there. I also will say that we do have members who are not able to get in the aerobic zone. We have some people who come and they're walking on the treadmill or they're on the bike and they're always below 60% heart rate max, but they still come, show up and do it. They are still elevating their heart rate up, just not past the 60% range. And they're still working on training their endurance, improving, their walking speed and going for 30 minutes or more, 30 to 40 minutes. So it is possible. There are some people though who are not getting their heart rate up, but we have tried. And then we say, okay, we've tried and now we know you're doing a good endurance exercise. That endurance exercise is still beneficial. It's not to say that other forms of exercise aren't beneficial. It's just that there is a particular research showing this higher intensity is. So we want to try to get there with everyone that we can. And in some cases, it may not happen. That's okay. There's still a lot that we can do that's beneficial, but we want to aim high and then, figure things out and modify as we go along. So what could a week of exercise look like? So like I would say, focus on when you're going to do your aerobic exercise first. Make sure that that fits in on your weekly schedule. So here I put aerobic exercise on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. So aimed for 4 days. That could be treadmill, cycling, a power walk outside. It could be a boxing class. Things like boxing can be high intensity, but that's where you have to measure it. We have, what we see is that for some people, boxing is high intensity. They're able to really get their heart rate up. But for some people, boxing is much more skilled. They're working on their balance and stepping and movement. And there's a lot of skill to it. It's very important and good exercise, but it may not be aerobic. And that's okay. It's still a good form exercise to do, but that's why you have to have a way that you're measuring and actually see for all the different types of exercise I do, what types am I actually getting my heart rate above 60% versus not. So we have 4 days a week of exercise. And then on Tuesday, we're maybe doing strength training, dance, yoga, tai chi, or boxing. On Thursday, we're going to go play pickleball. And on Sunday, we're going to rest, stretch, maybe do strength training. Make sure to keep moving. We definitely want to move every day, but it might be different on different days. And rest days could happen, different days during the week. But this is just one example schedule. And I would say focus really on figuring out what exercise is aerobic for you, and then putting that on your schedule 3 to 4 days per week and fitting in other things around that. So to support people in doing this type of exercise, we started Rogue in Motion, an online exercise program for people with Parkinson's. Included in the membership is unlimited access to live classes. We do live classes 5 days a week through Zoom. We do exercise and speech classes live and record them. So you can exercise your body and also exercise your voice system, which is also really important. You have unlimited access to the video library. We have over 2,000 recordings now in our video library, all different types of classes, different levels, different speeds. There's so many things in there that you could find to exercise with. We do a 30-minute consultation to get started. So when you join, I email you and say, let's set up, here's some information and intro. I'll get you on the email list so you get the emails with the links for the Zoom classes. And then also let's have a 30-minute consultation to get started so I can help answer any questions you have about the membership or help kind of fit our membership in with things that you're already doing. Maybe talk about this intensity aspect if that's something you have questions on. So we do a consult and that's included in the membership. You have ongoing access to physical therapists here at Rogue. So when we're teaching classes live, we're available to answer questions before and after class. And I think that really makes a huge difference too, as you get started, and keep progressing with your exercise over time. We do a weekly cooking class because what we eat really makes a big difference in our health as well. So we're doing, whole foods, like what can we make from scratch, but also taking into consideration the fact that people have Parkinson's and, chopping food and different things might be difficult. So we're going to, always incorporate that into our class. We do something called a PD School Watch Party, which is an online program called Parkinson School that has all sorts of great information about medication, supplements, exercise, meditation, and mindfulness. We meet once a week to watch those videos and discuss. We also do a monthly membership meeting to answer any questions about the membership. And we've had quite a few conversations recently about heart rates, how to measure, what the goals are, what we're working on. We also do a monthly educational meeting, and it's a wonderful community of people to connect with. So we started this, it's almost 3 years ago now. We started in 2020 in May. And so coming up in May, it'll be our 3-year anniversary of having this online membership. Our live class schedule, which is taught on Zoom, we're on the West Coast Pacific time. So we have times listed in Pacific time and Eastern. We start at 8 a.m. in the morning. We do have 3 classes during the week that are cardio using equipment, treadmills or bikes. We pulled in quite a few of our members had a piece of equipment at home that they maybe were using or weren't using and maybe weren't actually doing high intensity with. So we have classes, it's kind of like Peloton, only it's specific for Parkinson's, but we're on a piece of equipment exercising with you. The rest of our classes, you do not have to have any specialty equipment. We do power moves classes, high intensity interval training, which these across like our cardio are high intensity. And then across our HIIT and boxing are high intensity as well. Power moves is more moderate intensity, more flexibility, mobility type exercise. Our monthly meetings are on the first Monday of the month. Our cooking classes on Wednesday, our PD school watch parties on Thursdays, and our speech classes are on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we have a whole bunch of different classes that are available to you. We also record those classes and put them in our video library. So you can go to the video library. This is just a small sampling of what is there, but we've got our power moves plus strength, where we're really focusing on strengthening, building those muscles. High intensity interval training, that is high intensity. Our boxing classes are high intensity. Cardio is high intensity as well. So we really, our focus is to have the most challenging classes for people with Parkinson's available. So these are high level. We, not very much in sitting, really challenging classes. I am in my 40s, and these are a good workout for me. When I teach a class, I'm getting sweaty and out of breath and getting my heart rate up as well. So these are legitimately challenging classes. So if you want to join after today's webinar, if you came and you just learned and you're like, now I'm going to implement high intensity exercise in my life. Awesome. I love it. More power to you. Go out and do it. If you are someone who feels like you would benefit from classes, from some coaching, from support in achieving this, you are welcome to join our online membership. If you join, I will be emailing you immediately to set up that consultation so we can talk more about your particular situation. So with our online exercise membership, you can sign up either a yearly basis or monthly. I really recommend starting monthly to make sure that you like it. And then we have a lot of people who start monthly and then end up upgrading to annual, because with annual, basically the price is such that you're getting 2 months free. So you're only paying for 10 months of the year, basically. But I definitely recommend starting monthly. So you have to select monthly here. You'd enter your email, password, payment details. We have a code of exercise 50, which if you put in, you'll get 50% off your first month. So you get a week free trial. So when you first sign up, it's a 7-day free trial. And you can try everything, live classes, recorded classes. If you decide you don't like it and you cancel before the end of that 7 days, you will not be charged at all. If you put in this code and you're like, I want to give it at least, that week and then another month to really get a chance to try these classes, then you have that whole, a month where you only paid 50%, and you can decide, if you want to keep going or not. It's a month-to-month basis. There's no long-term commitment. That's how it works. If anybody is interested, I would love for you to join, use the code, get a discount, and we'd love to have you as part of the membership. So now if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And great question. So there's a question about how is the HIIT format versus the straight up high intensity aerobic? What intervals do you use and what heart rate percentage? So our goal is that people are getting between 60 and 80% of heart rate max. So with our online membership, that does require people having a method that they're measuring at home. So that's the range that we're asking people to get into. Sometimes for certain individuals, we may be focusing a little bit more towards one side or other of that spectrum. For someone who has a history of cardiac, we maybe are like being careful of higher intensities. And we're saying, let's really focus between 60 and 65 or 60 and 70%. So we'll help people do that math and kind of get set up so they know what their range is and what their focus is in terms of the heart rate percentage. But then we also have some members who are younger, newly diagnosed, and we're really telling them, okay, we are trying to get up towards 80 to 85%, because there is one particular research study that showed for people who were newly diagnosed within 3 years, that the 80 to 85% range was better than 60 to 65% range. Just one study, one particular group, but that's what we're talking with people on an individual basis. In terms of the format for the classes, so the high intensity aerobic, our cardio classes, we are on a piece of equipment, bike, treadmill, elliptical, something like that. And we do intervals to keep things interesting. And it also helps most of us work at a higher intensity. So we do a different interval series kind of every single class. We do intervals, sometimes as fast as 3 minutes. We also will do like an 8 or 10 minute hill where we're increasing the amount of resistance. So we're on the equipment. We do a little stretching before and after, but then we're on the equipment on Mondays for 40 minutes, on Wednesdays for 35, and Fridays for 30. So we have slightly different times, and we kind of are rewarding ourselves for all of our hard work throughout the week, but we're doing intervals on the equipment. So we're paying attention to heart rates potentially during that exercise. Although with cardio class, our goal is that people are above the 60% for the whole time period that we're exercising. The intervals are more to adjust speed and resistance on that piece of equipment. So that's the format for the cardio classes. Our high intensity interval training is basically, we had a circuit format in person in our gym where people rotate between 10 different stations. So for our high intensity interval training class, basically what we do is we have a class plan. We do a warm up at the beginning, different walking, jumping, lunges, power moves, things like that to warm up. And then we have a schedule. So we pick 2 high intensity exercises, one that we're going to do for the first round. And high intensity would mean like jumping jacks, squat jumps, burpees, things that are going to get our heart rate up. And then we pick 5 skilled exercises. We rotate back and forth for the first round between that first high intensity exercise and our skilled exercise, back and forth, 60 seconds on, 15 seconds between. So we're doing those kinds of intervals, different types of exercises. Then we take a quick rest break after that first round. That would be 10 intervals, 60 seconds on, 15 seconds between. Then we have picked a second exercise for high intensity, and we do the same skilled exercises again. So we, again, back and forth between high intensity and skilled. That's really, for people with Parkinson's, focusing on high intensity and skilled exercise, looking at balance, posture, flexibility, strength. All of those are important. So we want to try to get to all of that in one class. Most of our HIIT classes do not use really any special equipment. We use a yoga mat. We ask people to have light hand weights if they can, but otherwise you do not need any equipment. We do have one HIIT class during the week on Wednesdays where we use small equipment. We use a tidal tank, a TheraBand, and a hurdle, which people can purchase equipment if they want, or you can find things in your house that will, work to do those classes with. And so we add equipment to increase the level of intensity. So those are kind of the formats for classes. And these are ones that, again, you're welcome to join for 7 days and come and, join classes or watch them to see, really what the classes look like. So yeah, thank you so much for that question. Are there any other questions specific to any information about our membership and our classes, or just if you have a question about high intensity exercise in general? We don't have a lot of research in terms of, within aerobic exercise, high intensity intervals, shorter term, higher intensity versus longer duration, lower intensity. We don't really have research that has compared those. And I think it really depends a little bit more on individuals and what is right for them. I think for some people, kind of going a little bit longer, but lower intensity is better. And for some people, shorter high intensity is better. It also maybe depends on your schedule for the week, how much time you have to exercise. If you only have 30 minutes a day, really pushing that intensity level up higher is likely going to be beneficial. But yeah, there's lots of individual factors that we have to take into consideration too. And we don't have research that answers all the questions. And I don't even think, research would ever answer all the questions, because there are just individual differences. Even within a group of people with Parkinson's, there's still a lot of individual differences within that group. All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording.